Self-discipline is not merely a modern concept, but one deeply rooted in ancient Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that true freedom comes not from external circumstances, but from mastering oneself. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The journey toward unbreakable self-discipline begins with understanding that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control our responses. This fundamental Stoic principle, the dichotomy of control, serves as the cornerstone for developing extraordinary self-discipline. Consider how often we waste energy lamenting circumstances beyond our influence. The weather disrupts our plans, traffic delays our commute, or others fail to meet our expectations. The undisciplined mind reacts with frustration, anger, or despair. The Stoic mind, however, remains unmoved by such externals, conserving its energy for matters within its control. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens, advised Epictetus, who began life as a slave yet found freedom through Stoic practice. His words remind us that self-discipline starts with proper discernment, knowing where to direct our efforts and where to practice acceptance. In our modern world of endless distractions and instant gratification, this ancient wisdom becomes even more relevant. True self-discipline isn't about rigid control over every aspect of life, but about clarity in distinguishing between what we can and cannot influence. When you find yourself struggling with self-discipline, pause and ask, "Is this within my control?" This simple question, derived from Stoic philosophy, immediately redirects your focus from external frustrations to internal possibilities, the only realm where genuine self-discipline can flourish. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. These words from Marcus Aurelius highlight the importance the Stoics placed on how we begin each day. The morning. Ritual serves as a foundation for self-discipline throughout our waking hours. Marcus himself practiced morning meditation, setting intentions for the day and preparing his mind for whatever challenges might arise. This wasn't merely a preference but a deliberate practice to strengthen his resolve and clarify his purpose before the day's demands began to pull him in various directions. The modern equivalent of this Stoic practice involves creating a consistent, morning routine that reinforces your commitment to self-discipline. Rather than reaching for your phone to check social media or email, immediately surrendering your attention to external influences, begin with practices that center your mind and strengthen your will. Consider incorporating gratitude, meditation, review of principles, physical exercise, and planning into your morning ritual. Seneca noted, "The part of life we really live is small, for all the rest of existence is not life but merely time." A disciplined morning ritual ensures that you are truly living rather than merely passing time. It transforms the first hour of your day from a reactive scramble into a proactive foundation. Those who struggle with self-discipline often lack this intentional beginning. Their days start chaotically, and this disorder tends to propagate throughout their hours. By contrast, the Stoic approach to mornings creates momentum that carries through the day, making subsequent acts of discipline easier to maintain. Remember that consistency matters more than duration. Even a brief morning ritual, practiced faithfully, will yield greater benefits than an occasional lengthy practice. As Marcus Aurelius would remind us, it is not the grandeur of our actions, but their alignment with reason that determines their value. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" This practice, advocated by Seneca, reveals a powerful Stoic principle for building self-discipline: voluntary discomfort. The Stoics understood that comfort is the enemy of resilience. By deliberately embracing discomfort, not as punishment but as training, they strengthened their ability to endure hardship when it inevitably arrived. This practice develops what modern psychologists might call distress tolerance, the ability to function effectively even when experiencing discomfort. Consider how this principle might be applied today. Cold showers instead of warm ones, fasting for a day, walking instead of driving, sleeping on a harder surface, working in silence rather than with entertainment. Each of these practices trains the mind to function without immediate comfort, building the mental muscle of self-discipline. Epictetus, who knew true hardship as a former slave, taught, "It is difficulties that show what men are." By voluntarily introducing difficulties into our lives, we prepare ourselves for involuntary challenges. The person who has practiced hunger through intermittent fasting faces food scarcity with greater equanimity. The one who is trained in cold exposure meets winter's bite with less complaint. This is not asceticism for its own sake, but practical training for life's realities. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the obstacle is the way. Difficulties are not merely to be endured, but to be used as opportunities for growth. Each voluntary discomfort becomes a stepping stone toward greater self-mastery. Begin small, perhaps with a minor inconvenience like standing rather than sitting during a meeting or delaying a meal by an hour. Notice your mind's resistance and practice observing these reactions without immediately yielding to them. Gradually increase the challenge as your discipline strengthens. Remember that the goal is not suffering but freedom, freedom from being controlled by comfort-seeking impulses. As Seneca observed, it is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who hankers after more. True wealth lies in needing less, not having more. Begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." This seemingly pessimistic morning reflection from Marcus Aurelius actually reveals one of the most powerful Stoic techniques for building self-discipline: negative visualization, or what the ancient Stoics called premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Unlike modern positive thinking, which often avoids contemplating potential difficulties, Stoicism encourages us to mentally rehearse challenges before they occur. This practice serves multiple purposes in developing self-discipline. First, it inoculates us against disappointment. When we've already considered potential obstacles, we're less likely to be derailed by them. The person who is mentally prepared for a difficult conversation is better equipped to maintain composure when tensions rise. Second, it prompts advanced problem-solving. By anticipating challenges, we can develop strategies before emotions cloud our judgment. The athlete who has visualized potential setbacks during competition has already rehearsed appropriate responses. Third, it cultivates gratitude through contrast. As Epictetus advised, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." By imagining the loss of what we value, we appreciate its presence more deeply. To practice negative visualization, effectively identify an upcoming situation requiring self-discipline. Imagine various ways it might become difficult. Visualize yourself responding with calm, reason, and resolve. Consider what principles will guide your response. Return to the present with renewed appreciation and preparedness. This practice strengthens your psychological immune system, making you less vulnerable to disruption when challenges arise. The undisciplined person is easily thrown off course by unexpected difficulties. The Stoic practitioner, having already confronted these possibilities mentally, maintains equilibrium and purpose. As Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." By facing our fears in imagination, we diminish their power over our actions. This is not pessimism, but preparation. A crucial distinction for anyone seeking to build unbreakable self-discipline. Survey the circling stars, as though yourself were in mid-course with them, wrote Marcus Aurelius, describing a profound Stoic practice for developing perspective and self-discipline. This exercise, sometimes called the view from above, invites us to mentally step back from our immediate concerns and view them from a cosmic perspective. When we're caught in the grip of desire or aversion, the forces that most often undermine self-discipline, our perspective narrows. Small inconveniences loom large. Temporary pleasures seem worth sacrificing long-term goals, and momentary emotions override rational judgment. The view from above counters this narrowing by expanding our mental horizon. Imagine viewing your current situation from progressively greater heights, first from above your city, then your country, then the planet, and finally from the vastness of space. From this perspective, how significant are the desires pulling at your attention? How important is the discomfort you're trying to avoid? This cosmic viewpoint doesn't diminish your goals, but rather clarifies which ones truly matter. Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly, reminding himself, think of the whole universe of matter and how small your share. Think about the expanse of time and how brief, almost momentary, the part marked for you. Think of the workings of fate and how infinitesimal your role. This practice builds self-discipline by weakening the grip of immediate impulses. The craving for social media validation, the urge to procrastinate, the desire to indulge in unhealthy food, all these lose their compelling force when viewed against the backdrop of cosmic immensity and the brevity of human life. The view from above also reminds us of our place in human society. As we mentally zoom out, we see countless others facing similar struggles, working toward their own goals, experiencing their own joys and sorrows. This recognition fosters a sense of common humanity that can strengthen resolve. Your efforts at self-discipline connect you to everyone who has ever strived for self-mastery. When facing a challenge to your self-discipline, take a moment to practice this mental expansion. Feel your perspective widen as you imagine viewing your situation from increasingly distant vantage points. Notice how this shift in perspective changes your relationship to immediate impulses and desires. The disciplined life, seen from above, reveals its true pattern and purpose, not as a series of denials and restrictions, but as a coherent expression of human potential and dignity. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, taught Epictetus. This simple instruction highlights a crucial Stoic practice for building self-discipline, the internal dialogue we maintain with ourselves. The Stoics placed enormous emphasis on logos, reasoned discourse, as a tool for self-governance. They understood that our actions follow our judgments, and our judgments are shaped by the quality of our internal reasoning. When self-discipline fails, it's often because our internal discourse has become muddled, emotional, or irrational. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations exemplifies this practice. Throughout his personal writings, we see him reasoning with himself, questioning faulty assumptions, challenging emotional reactions, and clarifying his principles. This wasn't merely philosophical musing, but practical training in self-discipline through rational discourse. Consider how often our self-discipline crumbles because we tell ourselves stories that justify indulgence. I deserve this treat after such a hard day, or one missed workout won't matter, or I'll start tomorrow instead. The undisciplined mind accepts these narratives uncritically. The Stoic mind subjects them to rational examination. When you feel your resolve weakening, engage in Stoic questioning. Is this judgment based on clear reasoning or emotional impulse? Does this action align with my principles? Am I being influenced by false impressions? What would the person I aspire to be do in this situation? Epictetus advised his students to respond to every challenging impression with, "You are just an impression and not at all what you appear to be." This pause for rational assessment creates space between stimulus and response, the space where self-discipline operates. Practice articulating your reasoning clearly, as if explaining your decision to a respected mentor. Vague or emotional justifications often reveal themselves as inadequate when subjected to this level of scrutiny. The discipline of clear thinking supports the discipline of consistent action. Remember that this rational discourse isn't about self-criticism or harsh judgment. The Stoics emphasized reason tempered with compassion. As Seneca noted, we must be gentle with ourselves. The goal is clarity and truth, not self-punishment. By cultivating this habit of reasoned internal dialogue, you strengthen what modern psychologists might call metacognition, your ability to observe and direct your own thinking processes. This mental discipline forms the foundation for behavioral discipline in all areas of life. Make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be. This teaching from Epictetus introduces us to what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, perhaps their most powerful technique for building self-discipline. The Stoics recognize that between any external event and our response lies a crucial moment of judgment. We don't react to events themselves, but to our interpretations of those events. The discipline of assent is the practice of consciously evaluating these impressions before accepting them as true. When a challenging situation arises, a temptation, a setback, a provocation, the undisciplined mind automatically accepts its first impression and reacts accordingly. The disciplined mind pauses to examine the impression before granting it assent. This pause creates the space in which true self-mastery becomes possible. Consider how this works in practice. You feel an urge to abandon your work and check social media. Before acting, you pause to examine this impression. Is this urge based on a true need or merely a habitual craving? Is giving in to this impulse aligned with my values? What judgment am I making about my current work that makes distraction seem appealing? By questioning the impression rather than immediately acting on it, you reclaim your agency. The impression loses its automatic power over your behavior. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. By carefully choosing which impressions to accept, you determine the quality of your inner life and, consequently, your actions. This practice requires vigilance and repetition. The Stoics compared it to a gatekeeper who carefully examines each visitor before allowing entry into a city. Your consciousness is the city. Impressions are the visitors seeking admission. Some should be welcomed, others turned away, but none should enter without examination. The discipline of assent builds self-discipline by breaking the automatic chain between stimulus and response. Each time you pause to question an impression before acting on it, you strengthen this mental muscle. Over time, the pause becomes habitual, and your responses become increasingly aligned with your deeper values rather than momentary impulses. As Epictetus taught, freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. The discipline of assent helps us identify which desires truly deserve our attention, and which are merely passing impressions that can be observed and released without action. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger, advised Epictetus. This guidance points to another crucial Stoic practice for building self-discipline, the ability to observe oneself without harsh judgment or self-deception. The Stoics were pioneers of psychological self-awareness. They understood that we cannot change what we do not first acknowledge and accept. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this practice throughout his meditations, honestly examining his own tendencies, weaknesses, and progress without either self-flagellation or self-justification. This practice differs significantly from modern approaches that often emphasize either harsh self-criticism or uncritical self-acceptance. The Stoic approach combines unflinching honesty with philosophical detachment. You observe your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors as interesting phenomena rather than as definitions of your worth or identity. When your self-discipline falters, practice observing this lapse with curiosity rather than condemnation. What thoughts preceded the break in discipline? What emotions were present? What physical sensations accompanied the experience? This detached observation yields valuable information without triggering the shame spiral that often follows disciplinary lapses. Seneca described this practice as being one's own witness. I make it my business to keep under observation all my vices and faults. I take stock of myself and examine and assess myself. This self-observation becomes a form of accountability that doesn't depend on external monitoring or validation. The undisciplined mind either ignores its failings entirely or becomes consumed by shame when confronting them. Either extreme undermines progress. The disciplined mind observes its patterns with the detached interest of a scientist studying natural phenomena. This balanced awareness creates the conditions for genuine change. Practice this skill by setting aside time each evening for reflection. As Seneca recommended, when the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. This practice builds self-discipline by increasing your awareness of patterns and triggers, reducing the power of shame to derail your efforts, and developing the metacognitive skills necessary for self-regulation. As your capacity for non-judgmental self-observation grows, so does your ability to choose your responses rather than being driven by unconscious habits. Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This fundamental Stoic principle, articulated by Epictetus in the opening of his Enchiridion, provides perhaps the most powerful framework for developing self-discipline. The dichotomy of control, or what some modern Stoics call the trichotomy of control, offers a clear method for directing our efforts effectively. The undisciplined mind wastes energy fretting over outcomes beyond its control, neglects areas where it has complete agency, and fails to distinguish between the two. The disciplined mind focuses its energy precisely where it has influence, accepts with equanimity what it cannot change, and clearly discerns the difference. Consider how this applies to any goal requiring self-discipline. If you're working to improve your health, you have complete control over your food choices, exercise habits, and sleep hygiene. You have some influence, but not complete control over your weight, strength, and fitness levels. You have no control over your genetic predispositions, others' opinions of your appearance, or how quickly your body responds to your efforts. The disciplined person focuses entirely on the first category, the voluntary actions within their complete control. They exert appropriate influence in the second category without becoming attached to specific outcomes. And they practice acceptance of the third category without wasting energy on resistance or complaint. This clarity prevents the dissipation of willpower that occurs when we struggle against immovable realities or neglect our areas of agency. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Practice applying this framework to any area where you seek greater self-discipline. Draw 3 columns on a page. In the first, list everything within your complete control. In the second, list areas where you have influence but not complete control. In the third, list factors entirely beyond your control. Then direct your disciplinary efforts exclusively toward the first column, your strategic efforts toward the second, and your acceptance toward the third. This practice builds self-discipline by focusing your finite willpower where it can be most effective, preventing the depletion that comes from struggling against the unchangeable, and training your mind to find satisfaction in the exercise of agency rather than in particular outcomes. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This realization is the foundation of true self-discipline. Never say of anything, I have lost it, but I have returned it. Is your child dead? It is returned. Is your wife dead? She is returned. Is your estate taken away? Well, and is not that likewise returned? But he who took it away is a bad man. What difference is it to you who the giver assigns to take it back? While he gives it to you to possess, take care of it. But don't view it as your own, just as travelers view a hotel. This teaching from Epictetus reveals the final and perhaps most profound Stoic practice for building self-discipline: philosophical resilience. This is the capacity to maintain equanimity and purpose even when facing significant setbacks or losses. Self-discipline often falters in the face of adversity. The person who maintains a strict diet easily abandons it after receiving bad news. The dedicated writer stops working when faced with rejection. The committed meditator skips practice during times of stress, precisely when it would be most beneficial. The Stoics developed specific cognitive practices to maintain discipline during difficulty. Central to these was the reframing of adversity as an opportunity for growth and the exercise of virtue. As Seneca observed, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. When facing a challenge that threatens to derail your self-discipline, practice these Stoic reframes. View the challenge as training, not punishment. Just as an athlete builds strength through resistance, your character develops through difficulty. Remember that the obstacle itself is less important than your response to it. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Consider what virtue this situation calls you to exercise. Does it require courage, patience, temperance, justice? Focus on embodying that virtue rather than on avoiding discomfort. Recall that everything external is temporary and borrowed. Practice holding all possessions, positions, and even relationships with the awareness that they are not permanently yours. This philosophical resilience builds self-discipline by providing a stable foundation that isn't shaken by changing circumstances. The person who maintains their principles and practices regardless of external conditions demonstrates true self-mastery. As you develop this resilience, you'll find that self-discipline becomes less about forcing yourself to follow rules and more about expressing your deepest values consistently across all circumstances. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature, aligning your actions with the rational principles that define human excellence. The journey toward unbreakable self-discipline is ultimately a journey toward freedom. Freedom from being controlled by external circumstances, freedom from the tyranny of impulses and emotions, and freedom to direct your life according to your highest principles. As Epictetus, who knew both literal slavery and true freedom, taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself."